Hello, everybody. Welcome. We're going to be talking about the deal with Dawn. And just for you coming in, just come on in. Come on in. There's plenty of room. I am Brendan Kenny. I will switch this over, but I want to have it in. We're talking about emos. And specifically Dawn and his emo-ness. I think it plays a really important role in the case. And the case we're talking about is the case of Adnan Syed. This is a discussion about the Serial podcast, Serial Dynasty and Undisclosed, and all the investigation that's gone on into what really happened and who was responsible for the death of Heyman Lee. So we're starting with an image of Am I Emo? Just to get you in the frame of mind of what kind of person we're talking about, specifically Dawn. There's been quite a bit that's been talked about in the last few weeks, starting with Serial Dynasty. They got me about Dawn. So that's what we're stemming from. We're talking about him as an emo and what that tells us about his character, about him, about Hay, and about this case. So again, to all of you coming in, I'm Brendan Kenny. I'm a lawyer in the Twin Cities. I'm talking from home now. And I'm on Twitter at Kenny, Kenny, Brendan, at Kenny, Brendan. And if you like what you're hearing, you can, if you got a screen, you can hit the screen, which will put a heart, which is not a pickup or anything. It's just saying that you like what's being heard. So feel free to do that. And if you want to share what's being talked about today with anybody, all you have to do is swipe to the left, you'll see the share button. You push that, you can share on Twitter, you can share on Facebook, you can even send a link to an email. So do that at any time too, and you can do that more than once so more people can see, because a lot of times people see it later. And I see that Mary Lou Who 83 is shared on Twitter. Thank you so much. So we are talking about Dawn. What's the deal with Dawn? What's the deal with Dawn? And what I'm going to say is a non-spoiler alert. I'm not going to say whether he did or didn't have involvement in Heyman Lee's death. I don't think he did, frankly. But that's not what this is about. What's about is, who is he? Where does he fit in? So here's what I'm going to argue. He's emo. 3 factors support this. His past, how he acted when they were together, and how he's acted after. So we have that. So we were talking about why he's emo and what that tells us about his involvement. So what it tells us, I'm going to preview it right here, is that before he was a loner, what we can see, not someone you would think of being as a heartthrob, he had girlfriends. They were not like Hay. They were difficult relationships. He didn't have very high self-esteem. Hay came like manna from heaven. And if we trust Serial, which I do, he and I'm going to answer your questions about emo. And if we trust Serial, which I do, I think this affected him for the rest of his life, in his view of himself and just this situation that was so odd for him. Did they have emo in 1999? Glad you asked. Yes. And what you're seeing right here, magazine from 1999. Doesn't that guy on the right look like a hipster? I mean, is an emo just a hipster? And I have an emo, because we should always define terms before we assume what we're talking about. Again, anyone who's come in, we're talking about Dawn in the Adnan Syed case. Hi, Susan Simpson just came in. Talking about Dawn in the Adnan Syed case, and I've just said that we're taken from the perspective of him being emo. I'm not. Someone asked if I'm so sure he's innocent. I'm not, but for one very specific reason, and I'll just say it right now, why I don't think he was involved, is I don't see who his friend would be for burying the body. So that's just one thing. I don't see that coming together. But that's not what this is about. I'd be happy to talk about that at the end. And feel free to put questions, but I may not respond to them now, but I will at the end. So definition of emo. Someone said his dad, maybe. We can talk about that at the end. Definition of emo. What is an emo? Well, we should always go to the Urban Dictionary as a start for this thing. And the top-rated definition of emo from 2003 is, it talks about music. Genre of softcore punk music that integrates unenthusiastic, melodramatic 17-year-olds who don't smile, high-pitched, overwrought lyrics, and inaudible guitar riffs with tight wool sweaters, tighter jeans, itchy scarves, etc. There's that. And one definition that I like too, that's a little farther down, is emo is like a goth, only much less dark and much more Harry Potter. So the quote is, "My life sucks, I want to cry." So that's maybe the kind of person we're talking about. Why is it that as I'm sitting here today, me, like many of you, think that he's emo or something like that? Someone said just about the burial, need a friend, one-man job. From what I read about the burial and what would be needed to have buried Hay and disposed of her, it would have probably taken a very strong person or two people. And I don't think he was a very strong person. So who was Hay? Who was, in many of our minds, who was he before? Excuse me, who did I think of him as before? I heard about the Camaro. I heard of his blue-gray eyes. I heard he was dreamy, according to Hay. So I thought, when I heard Camaro, this is what I was thinking. I was thinking of a guy like this. Oh. That's what I was thinking. But who is Don probably? Probably much more something like this. So that's what I think that's the person we've got. We've got a person, again, according to Bob, and I meant to get the call-outs from the Serial Dynasty episode he did a couple times ago, where he said the great leading up to that was everything you know about Don is wrong. And it was true for me. So he talked to everyone he could. No one remembered him, and they said he gave off an emo vibe. So the Don driving around his Camaro, listening to Slow Ride, not the Don we're talking about, I don't think. All right. So his past. Okay. So who is he? Who do we want to? What picture? We have maybe a sound picture. A terrible way to put it. But what visual picture should we have? I'll give you a visual picture, and I'll even give you little bit of a dynamic. I'm saying that Don PETA in Hunger Games. So, dynamic a little bit like this, and I'll talk about it later. So we have two people that would seem to be matched for their background differences and differences in family. Looking from the outside, Anand and Hay would seem to be a good match. Someone said they don't know about Don owning a Camaro. Yeah, maybe if he didn't own a Camaro, it makes even more sense. But Adnan and Hay being a good match. They're both athletic. They're both good looking. They're both popular. And so it would seem like that would be a natural pairing. Not the same with Don as we understand he is. And so the mental image I'd give is, if any of you've seen Hunger Games, if not, pretty simple. You have Katniss, very attractive, powerful woman. You have Gale, very good-looking, alpha male type guy. And then you have PETA, which I know the plot does all sorts of things to create the romantic tension between Katniss and PETA, but it's not very believable, and at least for me. So that's the imagery I'm going to have in my mind. You can have it in your mind if you want. PETA, as Dawn as PETA, and something like that. Oh yeah, okay. So someone said, "Hey, PETA's good looking too." I agree. What I'm saying is that the way PETA's presented in the movie, of course, most actors are good looking, and their looks are sometimes lessened to fit the part. So that's my point. He's presented in a different way. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I don't know about their love story, but that's the imagery I have. So we have him. Oh, someone was being sarcastic. Okay, yes, about the love story, and I'm going to talk about a love story. So here's what I think: Don's an emo. The way he reacted in this case stems from an emo-ness, his emo-ness, and I'm going to have you write these three things down, and just if you could, just write it down so you can keep these next to you as you go. And if you want to, again, share this talk with anyone, you just swipe to the left and push share, either in Twitter, Facebook, link, and it's going to be available later. So if someone wants to look at it later, I'll either have it on YouTube or something like that. So here's the emo-ness part. Hay was out of his league, and he knew it. He was smitten and was not good at showing it, and he didn't understand why Hay was so into him, and why Hay was seemed to be so close with Adnan continually. He was devastated afterwards, desperate not to get fingered for the crime, and he still loves Hay today. You keep pausing. Someone says I keep pausing. All right. So I accept the constructive criticism that someone's giving about my pausing. So I will try to have more of a flow. Why emo? Well, his friends say so, according to Serial Dynasty. I shouldn't say his friends say so. People who knew him say so. Someone said there's a poor connection. I'm sorry. I'm connected to the internet. Technical difficulties. I'm connected to the internet. So I'm not sure why that is, but this will be recorded and I'll have it available. So anyone who can't stick around for this, feel free. You can get off or whatever, and I will have it available on YouTube or other places. And if you follow me on Twitter at KENNYBRENDAN at KENNYBRENDAN, you won't have trouble finding any of that. I know, shameless plug. So people who knew him say so. They say he was emo. Krista and Aisha say so. Krista more so. And Krista can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm saying the gist of her comments that she made when she was interviewed by Bob is that, remember, she was in that sequestered room during the trial because the witnesses weren't supposed to sit during Adnan's trial because they could get tainted by the other testimony. And so she was in there a long time in a room just with Don, had nothing else to do but to observe Don and his girlfriend. And she didn't understand the deal. The guy didn't strike her as anything. And I think she was being polite, but I think she thought, well, what are Hay and Don doing together, and why is Hay so into him? And Aisha, you may remember in Serial when she talked about that double date, I think it was Aisha, where she was on the date with her boyfriend who was 15, Don was 20, Hay was 17, and it was just a disaster. Well, I think part of the thing is, if that had been Adnan there rather than Don, it wouldn't have been a disaster because he would have made it fun. So that says to me, although she didn't say so many words, something about Don and what kind of presence he had. He didn't fill up a room the way Adnan did, and Hay lit up a room, and he wasn't that way. And Adnan seemed to say so. I might be wrong, but someone said that Adnan noted when he met Don, boy, this guy is not really impressive. And you'll notice, and this is just my take, that when Adnan had pointed out to people about her dating a white guy, I think that might have been code for saying kind of a dorky guy. Is my sense. So that's why I think we think he's emo. We have enough background evidence before even getting to the facts we have and how he acted. And just for a second, just to see the difference between PETA and the competition. Here's in Hunger Games. Okay, so Katniss is deciding between Gale and PETA. PETA. Anyway, that's just a little implausible to begin with. So now we have to ask ourselves, I think I have to ask myself, and I did, what's the deal with Hay? Meaning, why was she so into Dawn? Now, this is not going to be bashing anybody. Okay, so I'm not going there. What I want to say is I'm not going to flesh out this argument, but I'm going to make a quick one. And the quick one is, there's an idea of love, a romantic idea of love in the Western world that puts a priority or a fixation on excitement over happiness. There was that sort of excitement between her and Adnan, but there were other problems that happened, and that was transferred to some degree to Dawn. And there's some other factors too that could make up why she fell for Dawn. One is this: I'm just going to say that she was in high school, and in high school, if you remember in high school, maybe your experiences wasn't this way. There's plenty of people who now are considered very attractive, beautiful, very successful, brilliant, that for some reason weren't in high school, and vice versa. And what I mean is that she might not have known kind of where she fit into everything in terms of looks, in terms of her brilliance, in terms of other things. Also, think about the small world that Hay was in. She was in a magnet program with 30 people. She knew people outside the program, but the people in the magnet program stuck pretty close together. And so I'm just listing this stuff. I'm going to flesh it out a little bit. If he had a Camaro, that kind of paints a picture too. He had two parents that she could meet. So the idea of them forever as a structure was there. There wasn't. He lived in a place called Bel Air. Now, I think I know, Bel Air is a relatively middle-class community. Someone from that area could tell me wrong, but that's just what I could see online. And the relationship with Adnan wasn't working. All right. So back up. What do I mean? What do I mean when I talk about this idea of excitement and love? And I'm just going to unplug a book. You don't have to agree with everything in it. It's called Love in the Western World. I'm not going to argue in defense of it, but here's the thesis. The thesis is this. Can we be in such a state of delusion, can we have been so thoroughly mystified as really to have forgotten the unhappy aspect of passion? Or is it that, in our heart of hearts, we prefer to what must seemingly fulfill our ideal of a harmonious existence, that something that afflicts and yet elevates us? So what the author's saying is that in romantic ideas of love, you see in movies this excitement, this high pressure, this passion, this suffering. What is desired is this heightened state of feeling more than happiness. So if most of us to one degree or another are affected by that, and certainly see things that was okay. So I'm way off on Bel Air. So is Bel Air not even nice? Okay. So I thought at least it was a middle class community, and if she had. It used to be nice. Well, was it in 1999? Is the question. So what I'm saying is when we say that it wasn't even in 1999, well, I might be totally off then. But I will say that she did mention specifically driving to Bel Air in her AOL profile, and it was sliding. Well, someone's saying that Bel Air was sliding in 1999. What I'm saying is not that this was. This was a fully fleshed out thing, meaning not that Dawn actually had these qualities, but there was enough of something on the outside where someone could think that. So again, the two parents that she could meet, and someone said it was moving up. So the two parents that she could meet, the Camaro maybe, the fact that it was called Bel Air, and her small world that she lived in, because as I understand, Hay immigrated over to the U.S., I think at age 6 or 7. She was living in Baltimore, and I don't know, I guess she lived in California for a while, and she was in a magnet school with 30 people. And frankly, and I don't mean this, crudely, but yeah, she was outside of town, and he was a white guy, and I don't know that there were that many white guys from his background that were in the area. So I'm not taking a position on it. I'm just saying those were the things that were kind of maybe in the air. So I think I fleshed that out enough for now, because I tend to go on and on. Okay, let's talk about their relationship, and this ties into what maybe led up to Hay having a thing for for Dawn. Is you had the buildup, and the buildup I think was from about October till January 1st when they went on their first date. And Dawn had this girlfriend, and I agree with someone just said he was probably talking about how she was mistreating him. Here's when I think of a song and I think of what Dawn was going through in his relationships. This is what I think of. Remember this? Somewhere my age, you remember this? Yes, so that was at least how he felt things were going. Someone said they saw him back. Yeah, it's a great song. So that's how he felt things were going, and he was talking to her about it. And if we accept the idea that in many of us, and in Hay perhaps, this excitement, this passion was more important than happiness. So if that's true, think of Romeo and Juliet. Think of the times when they made decisions that only really made sense, except to say that they were thwarting their happiness, right? So Romeo kills Tybalt for no real good reason based on his prior behavior, and what results? They're separated and their passions thwarted. If that had not happened, they would have been married, they would have been happy, he would have been changing diapers in a year. But that was not to be. So if we assume that there's a tendency to create obstacles in the way of happiness and love to heighten things, and again, that's a subconscious thing, it's not necessarily conscious, think she had 2 months or so or more to do that. So she meets him at LensCrafters, and there's something about him. there's something about him that is I'm sorry, I get distracted by comments. No, the comments that this person is making about Bel Air are very good. He or she is pointing out that it was different. Don't say you're sorry. I'm just explaining why the flow isn't there, and I'm going to talk about the end. But the person's just talking about their experience with Bel Air and how it actually was. I would say that, absent nothing else, the fact that that she heard the name Bel Air, and she had never been there. Maybe the only time she had been there to Bel Air with Don was the night before she was killed. And I'm presuming she met his family. She had met, I presume, his mother, but she had met the family at that point, and who knows how it went. Now, the buildup. So she has 2.5 months to build up. So during that time, they're talking, but there's no possibility of anything happening between them. So based on that, she's not really going to get to know him. So she can fill in her mind, fill in the blanks of what she sees about him. If, on the other hand, he had been free, he had been single, maybe something would have happened, but she would have had less time to build up this image of him. So I think that's what happened during that time. And they were building some rapport, and she was talking about her situation, he was talking about his. All right, so let's talk about during the relationship. Well, how long was this relationship? 11 days. We're talking about 11 days. Don said that he. Oh, and someone's saying, I know the person who is commenting is a nice person. That's not why the flow's getting interrupted. I'm just explaining why, because I'm not really an expert at this yet, and so I get distracted, and it's my own doing. So they had an 11-day relationship. They were seeing each other every other day. So they saw each other 5 or 6 times when they were going out. And during that time, Hay had her AOL profile that was Don-centric, about everything about Don and how great he was, and how she it must have, I'm guessing, been done on the 12th or soon around that time, because she talked about her favorite thing was driving up to Bel Air. So I think that was directed at Dawn. They got together. They talked apparently till 3 in the morning on the 12th. And then we could say the relationship went on a little longer because, well, I'll back up. We don't know for sure. We know that Hay was quiet the day of the 13th. So that says to me that something happened on the 12th between them. Many people have said, I'm going to segue in from there, because I think we have the basis of the relationship, segue in from there to what happened after the relationship. What happened after the relationship is that Don was talked to by police, and he was talked to by the consulting group that, as I understand, had a connection to Hay's uncle. And there's a few things, and I'm going to go directly to Susan Simpson's blog from March about the question of Don's alibi, to touch on the main things that he said and did during that time. So let's hit this up when we have the investigation. So Hay's missing. Officer Adcock talks to Don 1:30 in the morning. And 1:30 in the morning, they speak to him. He doesn't know the whereabouts, and he last talked to her on January 12th. And he talked to her on the 14th. They checked around his house. We have that, and then we have O'Shea interviewing Don on the 22nd of January. And I don't think it says that he talked to him in person. So we know that he just laid out kind of where he was, his alibi, as we would call it. And that's when he broke in to say that he had known Haley since October 98. So that's when this all started, them knowing each other. They started to date January 1st, and and he's right, I think, that Hay and Adnan broke up in mid-December. He said that Adnan was polite and cordial, and that's when it says that Dawn said that Hay told her that she spent a summer in California with her father, and she might like to live in California. A lot of people have commented, and I have too, that it seems as though this idea about Hay being in California, or Hay having her car at the Baltimore airport, or Hay going somewhere else, came from Dawn. That may have been true, but it doesn't mean, as I previously thought, that there was some misdirection going on here. It might be that that's what he thought happened, especially if they had some sort of argument. So here's I'm going to speculate a little bit here about what happened on the 13th. Based on everything we've said about Don, about who he was, where he came into, how he had been treated, how surprised, shocked, waiting for the other shoe to drop he was with Hay. Something had happened on the 12th. They had talked till 3 in the morning. Maybe it had been patched up. Maybe it hadn't. Hay was preoccupied. And at some point, some way, maybe on the 13th, they went to meet somewhere, and Hay never showed up. And just think about those scenes in movies when a guy who seems like he's seeing a girl who's out of his league, doesn't show up for a date or something. He's dejected, and he just doesn't even have the energy to do anything again. So I'm suggesting that that's what have happened here, and that might explain why when the consultants talked to Don soon after, let me see the date, about him not seeming to be concerned. Okay, so we had, what we're talking about is the consultant talking to Don. And it doesn't say that the consultant met with Dawn. What it does say is that he confirmed that January 12th was the last time he saw her. He said that he called her later to assure that she had arrived home safely. During the date, he claimed she told him that she'd had an argument with her mother earlier that day, and she'd expressed a desire to live with her father in California. And when asked how she would accomplish it, Dawn seemed to think she would either drive there or leave her car in the satellite parking facility at BWI Airport and fly by commercial airline to California. He did not appear as enthused about their relationship as Haley's diary indicates she was. Now, I don't know when this was done or when this conversation had happened. And I'm not saying that all the information he provided about what she might have done was truthful. But what I am saying is that if we have a guy who's not like Anon, who's not happy-go-lucky, who hasn't really been popular with girls, or at least with the type of girl that Hay was, and this relationship, this 11 days that he had was profound. It was a dream come true. It was something he couldn't really dream of happening. It went away, and he's devastated and thinking, well, the cops are going to be after me. He doesn't know what's going on in the investigation, and if he's a morose emo who always thinking the worst and listens to sad music, that could be something he would believe, and in a sick way could have an emotional appeal that, oh my gosh, the other shoe's going to drop, they're going to come after me and put me away. Exactly the opposite of Anand's reaction. And that could explain the fraudulent time card that was created either by him or by someone else. And all this without him having any involvement in Heyman Lee's death. So that, I think, is the main picture I'm painting of Dawn. And no hope of me saying what happened to Hay, except that something happened, as we all know, between the time that she left the school and didn't pick up her cousin. And I would say something happened between the time she left the school and probably went to meet Dawn. And I'll say this thing right here. It might not have even been to meet with Dawn. I mean, maybe she went to make a phone call because she didn't have a cell phone, as I can think, and wanted to make it from a private place. And something happened when she was there. So that's what I'm theorizing. So to go back, we have Dawn, we have Dawn the emo, Dawn Peta in the love triangle with Katniss and Gale, a la Hunger Games, smitten with Hay, out of his league and knew it, smitten with Hay, not good at showing it, didn't understand really why she was going after him, and then didn't understand the dynamic between Hay and Adnan. So I think there probably was some sort of argument about that where he says, what's the deal with Adnan? Because it didn't really make sense to him. He was desperate afterwards, devastated afterwards, desperate not to get fingered for a crime. And this is an experience that lives with him today, and he's still affected by it, because that was the one time in his life where someone that he didn't think would ever have any interest in him did. And, it could have really changed him in a positive way. And I'm just going to assume that for now, based on what we know, and based on me really having trouble imagining him getting rid of this body, which, I mean, it could have happened, but that's my hypothesis. And that's, I think, just about all I have for it. I'm going to just look at a few things. I want to say to you, people out there, some of you who are on Reddit, if I have some good ideas, it probably came from you on Reddit and super secret groups that exist there that I won't get into. There's a lot of good work going on, and I took a lot of it, and you're not going to get cited for it, but if you recognize it, you know who you are. I'm just going to look over quickly for us before I answer some questions about Dawn's date, their date on the 12th, or about Hay. She was on the 13th. There are good subreddits. I can't tell them to you, but if you reach out, maybe to me or someone else that's in the serial world on Twitter, maybe you can get connected with them. So I just want to get more about what they were saying about Hay. Is she was quiet and thinking about Dawn. I think we know from the testimony. So if she's in that reaction, quiet and thinking about Dawn, it certainly suggests to me that there was some decision, some sort of tension that was going on the 13th that wasn't there before, and that happened in the 11 days that they had a relationship. So that's my thesis. Think about it yourself. I'm at Kenny, KennyBrendan on Twitter. You can tweet at me there. That's probably the best way to reach me. And I'd love to hear other things. And I'm sure Serial Dynasty is the next episode is going to have some good stuff. I don't think Undisclosed is going to be dealing with Dawn this week, but I think Serial is, if I remember. And keep in mind on Twitter that Serial Dynasty now has, I think it's Truth and Justice is what it's called, because the old account has been hacked by somebody. So if you see someone from the account and the @ is Serial Dynasty, it is not Bob Ruff. So keep that in mind. Does anyone have any questions or anything they want to say? There were a lot of questions earlier. I didn't do a very good job kind of moving with them, and so I do want to answer them. If anyone has some comments about why they disagree about Dawn, about his involvement or anything, I'd be happy to hear them. Someone said, was it proven that Hay was killed on the 13th? Could she have been held for a few days? Well, first, the podcast Truth and Justice. If you're subscribed to Serial Dynasty, in any way, if you go to the website Serial Dynasty, you'll be able to get the podcast. I'm not 100% sure on how it all works out. I just wanted you to know that if you see a Twitter handle and it's at Serial Dynasty, and the picture is of a composite picture of Heyman Lee and some other things, and if you look at the description, it basically says Adnan did it. That is not Bob Ruff. So Bob Ruff's, let me just find it right now. Bob Ruff's thing is, I'm going to find it. Okay, he's on Serial Dynasty at Audio Boom for one more thing. All right, Truth and Justice Pod. Okay, it's Truth Justice Pod. That's what it is. Hay being dead. I think, if I remember what we know about from the autopsies that were done and from the experts that were in Undisclosed, I think she would have had to been killed soon after the 13th, if not on the 13th. I think what they said is the lividity patterns were consistent with no later than midnight or so. So I thought the same thing, that perhaps she was held for a while, but I think it was beyond the 13th. Anything else that people have? So I didn't write down all the other questions or comments. The stuff about Bel Air was very good. Who do I personally lean toward? I think one of those, I have to say, one of those serial killer types. I know it sounds, the odds are bad, or the odds are low that would happen, but I just don't see any other alternative that makes, yeah, Ronald Lee Moore, right, that's the one. I always get the two mixed up, so I don't want to say the wrong one. Yeah, I think that's the most likely thing. And so it's a shame. I think we will find out what happened, but yeah, I don't think Jay, I don't think Jay had anything to do with it. Maybe he heard something. I think people pointed out about the adult bookstore. Are you personally convinced that Don didn't? Pretty much. I mean, you have to. I'll put it this way. I couch this whole talk as not really depending on whether he did or didn't, but that's probably not true. Probably the way I looked at him and the emo thing is based on him not being involved in the murder, and it explains the way he reacted. This is what it really comes down to. You might remember that Jim Trainum said, the expert witness, that you have to really put aside people's description of how people acted after something traumatic happened. And I'd say that that's true with one caveat. If you understand someone's baseline, you can. And the baseline of emo, I think, explains it. Do you think Don's mom was trying to protect him? Yes. If she dummied up the time card, yes. I can just imagine. I mean, put yourself in her shoes. You have a brooding, morose son, maybe, and this terrible thing's happen, and he's in the dumps, he's depressed. You wouldn't believe in a million years that he'd kill somebody, and he's convinced the cops are after him. You'd want to protect him. Yeah, that's the problem. I'll give you that. Someone says, why didn't Don talk to the cops till 1:30 a.m., till after the burial? It's a problem. Yeah, I think it's a problem. It could have been after the burial. So let me be clear. He doesn't have an alibi. So he could have done it. It was physically possible for him to do it. But what I'm getting to is when you look at the crime, when you look at really how terrible it was, you look at it seems like the effort taken, it seemed like someone was, would have to be pretty brutal, and would have to have more than one person to help. And keep this in mind, too. What on earth did Don know about Lincoln Park? Is there any indication that he had any connection to that part of Baltimore? I've seen none. So what would he be doing there? How would he know? Any of this is possible. I just don't see it coming together to point the finger at Don. Someone asked if I think Adnan will be released. Yes. What are the chances of that? Yes. What I think is going to happen, and my opinion on this is probably no better than any of yours, because I am a lawyer, but I'm not a criminal lawyer, but I've listened to a lot of the true crime stuff and what happens. Someone said they're told the locals don't even call it Lincoln Park. Yeah, I don't know about that. But I think with with Adnan, the deal is so much of this stuff, the evidence is faulty. There's so many probably Brady violations that a lot of stuff will have to be thrown out, and maybe there would be an order for a retrial. But what on earth are they going to have as evidence at the retrial? There's just nothing. If the cell phone records are out, and Jay has been so thoroughly discredited, and Adnan has a very good lawyer now, it's done. Now, the state's going to fight it tooth and nail. I don't know when it's going to happen. And I think a lot of what they're doing in their briefing is directed at the public to kind of keep a lid on the amount of public outcry for him to be released. I know a little bit about Adnan being married and divorced in jail. If you look at Rabia Chaudhry's blog, she's talked about it and actually has a short quote from from his former wife. Oh, and someone said, what does the state say? Well, the state does a lot of things. Keep in mind, and I'm talking about the most recent brief, which some of you may have read, which was the state's opposition to Adnan's motion to reopen for new evidence to be heard in the trial court. So there was a opposition from the state. And they kind of took whatever facts were there and tried to paint the worst picture for Adnan possible. And that's kind of the way it plays out. So there's less public outcry, and the judges might have to really step back from wanting to do something, like release them. Because you just have to keep in mind, the state, it might not so much be about releasing Adnan, but not looking bad. And so the worse Adnan looks, the less bad they look. Someone said about Kevin Urick facing charges. One thing, and I do know something about this because I should say this, if this is kind of the time after the talk, so I'm just kind of talking, so if this sounds disjointed, I'm not intending for this to go on, I'm just answering questions. So if you're like, why is this still going on? It's because I'm answering questions and the main body of my talk's done. So I want feedback, please give me feedback, but that's one piece of feedback, that's not necessary, if that's what you have. So Kevin Urick wouldn't face charges for corruption probably, because there are all sorts of what are called immunities. And immunities range from absolute immunity to qualified immunity. And absolute immunity would be like it sounds, an absolute immunity. For instance, a congressperson can't be sued for defamation for something they say on the floor of Congress. So absolute immunity. They could say anything about anybody on the floor of Congress, and they couldn't be sued for defamation. Maybe they could have ethics violations or something based on that, based on the rules of Congress. And similarly, judges can't face charges just for bad opinion. And prosecutors, it's very limited what you can sue prosecutors for. So they can do a lot without really serious financial or criminal consequences. And someone said about the faking an affidavit from Asia. If I remember right, it wasn't that he faked an affidavit from Asia. He misrepresented what she said to him, arguably, and he was actually the guy who testified. And he said, well, I talked to her, and this is what she said, Rabia said. There's a lot of degrees of separation. But I don't think that Asia ever pursued an affidavit on behalf of the state. Yes, and I think he did dissuade her from testifying. I do believe that. Anything else? Comments, questions? Well, with that, I think we've gone on long enough. Again, you can go ahead and share this as well. Someone just said, how do you right, that someone said that didn't Urick say that the family pressured her? Yes, and I think that was referring to Rabia mostly, because Rabia did meet with her after the trial, because that's when she found out that she was a potential alibi witness, and she didn't know that before the trial. Someone said, how are prosecutors going to be dissuaded from engaging in wrongful conduct without having consequences criminally or civilly? Good question. I don't know. You would think maybe public opinion, but at least historically, I don't think I'm being controversial in saying that public opinion has not tended to be on the side of the criminally accused. So a prosecutor would face much more pushback for being soft on crime than hard on crime. Someone said, if Asia didn't say that the family dissuaded her, isn't it fake? So I think maybe someone's asking a question. What I'm saying is that maybe we're misunderstanding. If Kevin Urick testified at trial that Asia said that the family pressured her into signing that affidavit. So he was basically saying it was a fraudulent affidavit. And if he said that and that wasn't true, then his testimony was fraudulent. So that's really the possibilities there with Asia. So I think that's all the questions that we have. If people have more, I can keep going. This will be available through, it'll be replayed, a tweet will be sent. And again, I'm at KENNYBRENDAN, at KENNYBRENDAN. The best way to kind of follow what I'm doing is on Twitter. There's other things I'm doing too, but that's the easiest thing. And you're welcome for the post. Thank you for listening. Thank you all for being involved. And this will be replayed, that you can check it out. And it also will be on YouTube. So anytime you want to check it out or share it with anyone or comment or think more, you can. And someone just said about Kevin Urich and consequences. I think it's very unlikely that there will be any. There might be a way that Adnan could seek recovery from the state for the time he was in prison, but that would come from the state. And in very rare circumstances, do financial recoveries that people get against the state and against its agents, like police officers, prosecutors, in cases where they can, ever come directly out of the individual's pocket. So it's typically the taxpayers that pay in the end. That's all I have. Thank you so much. Thank you for the kind words. And please send me any feedback, positive, negative. I want to do a better job and make this more interesting and, make things better. So thank you so much. Have a great night. Have a great weekend.